Elizabeth Tudor I was born September 7, 1533, at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, United Kingdom. Her life was troubled before she was even born. Her father, Henry VIII, was named head of the church after the passing of the Act of Supremacy. After becoming the head of the church, he allowed himself to divorce Catherine of Aragon, the mother of Mary Tudor, aka Bloody Mary. King Henry VIII wanted to produce a male heir to the throne. Since Catherine gave him a girl and was too old to have any more kids, he wanted a divorce, which the church wouldn't allow. While King Henry VIII was still technically married to Catherine, he married his second wife, Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, hoping that she would bear him the strong and healthy son that Catherine of Aragon never did. But on September 7th, Anna gave birth to Elizabeth instead. Before Elizabeth was even 3 years old, her mother Anna was beheaded on the Tower Green on May 19th. Although she was too young to understand exactly what was going on, Elizabeth's life would now be changed forever. Her name was changed from Princess Elizabeth to Lady Elizabeth. Her governess found that her needs were being neglected, and she decided to write to the king and ensure Elizabeth was provided with clothes and anything else she needed, considering her clothes were too small to even fit her. At the age of 4, her governess was replaced for Catherine Champernoun, a very important figure in Elizabeth's life. At the age of 8, one of Elizabeth's stepmothers, Catherine Howard, who had also become a very important part of her life, was also executed at Tower Green, just like her mom had been just a few years ago. Finally, Elizabeth started to try to understand what was going on. She told her childhood friend Robert Dudley that she would never marry. The sorrow had scared her out of wanting a relationship.
Elizabeth and her stepbrother Edward, both of which were very close in age, shared a passion for learning and both followed the same religion. Both were then given an impressive education that began at a very early age. It started teaching them Latin, Greek, Spanish, French, and history, philosophy, mathematics, and much more. Elizabeth also spent her time learning needlework and other arts, along with learning how to play musical instruments. On January 28, 1547, King Henry VIII died, leaving Elizabeth and her brother Edward orphans. On top of that, Elizabeth was only 13 years old, and her brother, who was only 9 years old, was now King of England. Elizabeth later went to live with the Queen and her newly married husband, Thomas Seymour, a handsome man in his late 30s. Some say that Elizabeth may have developed a teenage crush on Seymour, and he took advantage of it. Sometimes the Queen accompanied the two early in the morning in Elizabeth's bedchamber. Seymour seemed to be having affairs with the both of the girls, and Elizabeth decided it would be best for her to leave. Because there was not much tension between the Queen and Elizabeth would still write to the Queen. Elizabeth soon found out that the Queen was pregnant. Soon the Queen gave birth to a baby girl, but the Queen did not survive the birth. Shortly after her death, Seymour began to seek Elizabeth's hand in marriage. Elizabeth turned him down. Thomas Seymour was later arrested for treason. Elizabeth was then closely guarded. On July 6, 1553, Lady Jane Grey, who, ensuring the influences of Dudleys, was proclaimed queen. After the coup failed and Mary went through a fight for the throne, Mary, Elizabeth's sister, was proclaimed queen. The differences between the two women soon caused problems. Although Mary was suspicious of Elizabeth, during Mary's final illness, she accepted Elizabeth as her heir to the throne. Later, Elizabeth was stuck in the middle of a dangerous political plot. Elizabeth denied any knowledge of Wyatt's plans that emerged to have Elizabeth marry Edward Corte. The Queen's close advisor, Simon Renard, pushed Mary and her counselors to bring Elizabeth to trial. Elizabeth did not get a chance to prove her innocence at trial. Instead, she was sent as a prisoner to the Tower of London, then imprisoned in the Bell Tower, along with some of her servants. The Queen's advisor urged execution, but Elizabeth's increasing popularity in the country worked in her favor, and she was soon released from the tower. Mary soon believed herself to be pregnant. This concerned Elizabeth because her chances of becoming queen seemed farther and farther away. As time went on, it was clear that Mary was not pregnant, and the people started to dislike Mary. They didn't listen to her or like any of her ideas. Mary reluctantly accepted Elizabeth as her heir to the throne. Mary died on November 17, 1558. Elizabeth was now just 25 years old, and the Queen of England. When hearing this news of her sister's passing, Elizabeth knelt on the ground and whispered in Latin what she truly must have felt. "This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes."
To the north, I present unto you Elizabeth, your undoubted queen. To the south, I present to you Elizabeth, your undoubted queen.
With the death of Queen Mary in 1558, Elizabeth becomes the Queen of England at just 25 years old. Becoming a queen is not a simple process and takes some time to become official, especially because Elizabeth was exception to the rule. There are several events that take place to make the queen official, like coronation and the Elizabeth religious statement. Elizabeth's coronation in 1559 took place at Westminster Abbey. After the coronation, people paraded the streets of England. When the parade came to an end, Queen Elizabeth and her family stood on the famous balcony of the Buckingham Palace. She waved to the crowd and the Royal Air Force flew across the mall in a tight formation. When Queen Elizabeth was crowned, it was expected of her to restore the Protestant Church of England. There are two events that led to the reformation of the Church: the Act of Supremacy and the Act of Uniformity, which are also known as the Elizabeth Religious Statement. The Act of Supremacy gave Elizabeth complete control of the Church of England. When her father had ruled, the monarch was known as head of the Church in England. However, when Elizabeth came to reign, it was changed to Supreme Governor of the Church in England. It is not known why this was modified, but some believe it was because she was a woman, and during this time period, women were lower in spiritual matters than men were. Many were uncomfortable with the idea of a woman ruling as well. Along with this act giving Queen Elizabeth complete power of the Church of England, it was mandatory that the clergy had taken an oath of loyalty to the Queen. If they choose not to, they would then lose their position in the office. Along with the Act of Supremacy was the Act of Uniformity. The Act of Uniformity was the most important thing of the Elizabeth Church. This act established a set form of worship. The prayer books of Edward were all combined into one book. This book was to be used in every church. Church attendance on Sunday and other holy days was made a law. There was a 12-pence fine for those who did not attend, and the chunk of money was then given to the poor. So that both the Protestants and the Catholics could be involved in communion, it was worded very vaguely and universal. The ornaments and vestments remained the same. To pass the Act of Supremacy through government was a very easy process. However, the passing of the Act of Uniformity was much more challenging because a significant number of the Parliament were still Catholic and opposed the bill. This eventually was passed with a lead of 3 votes. This religious statement began in the summer of 1559. Although just like in every system, problems arose, this statement proved to be a significant success. Shortly after Queen Elizabeth was crowned, Elizabeth became extremely ill with smallpox. The smallpox almost brought her life to an end. Luckily, Elizabeth overcame the smallpox and continued ruling England. Elizabeth took on an important task when she became the queen. She decided that she was going to revive the English economy and completed that with great success. Elizabeth also faced many challenges regarding Queen Mary of Scots, because Mary was trying to overthrow Elizabeth's throne and become the Queen of England. Despite many of Mary's actions, Elizabeth set it aside and continued ruling England with great passion and pride. In the meantime, Queen Mary was imprisoned in a tower and was watched over very closely. This was a contribution to the Northern Rebellion. The Northern Rebellion was an attempt made by Catholics to re-establish their faith in fathers. However, they failed. On February 8, 1587, Elizabeth saw that Queen Mary of Scots was executed. With Queen Mary gone, Queen Elizabeth had one less thing to worry about. Not only did Queen Elizabeth have religion as her number one concern, but in 1570 she was excommunicated from the Catholic Church by the Pope. Not only did this create many controversial problems, but her death was plotted just a year later. Fortunately, the plot had failed and saved Queen Elizabeth's life. There were always many conflicts between Spain and England during Elizabeth's reign. Sir Francis Drake was in control of the English fleet. Queen Elizabeth had decided that Drake should sail to the West Indies. Drake attacked many small Spanish villages and came home with a great success story to tell. However, Philip II, the King of Spain, was not very pleased with England and decided that he was going to attack the coast of England. Drake quickly became notified and informed the Queen that they should surprise attack Spain first. So, Drake did just that and conquered many boats and much more in Cadiz. Although this put a pause to Philip's plan on attacking, in 1588 Philip II sent the Spanish Armada into the English Channel. Queen Elizabeth got the English fleet prepared to battle. The English injured many people and damaged many boats, sending the Spanish Armada north. Because of a huge storm, the rest of the Spaniards were pushed north, causing them to head back home in defeat. Queen Elizabeth clearly saved her land with the win over the Spanish Armada. About 10 years later, the Spanish Armada comes back, looking to defeat England, but once again, Queen Elizabeth and the English fleet stopped them. Shortly after Queen Elizabeth defeated the Spanish Armada for the second time, she became extremely ill with many symptoms such as pains, aches, and sore throat. Queen Elizabeth spent the rest of her days in her private apartments where she wished for peace and quiet. Elizabeth spoke to her parliament and stated, "It is not my desire to live or to reign longer than my life, and my reign shall be for your good." The Queen simply did not feel well and was unable to fight it. On March 24, 1603, Queen Elizabeth died in her sleep. The English were very upset because they were ruled by Elizabeth for nearly 45 years and they were not prepared for the new way of life that they may encounter. Queen Elizabeth had wished that there would be no post-mortem or autopsy of her body, and her wish came true. Her body was preserved and placed in a coffin where it made its journey to Westminster Abbey, where Elizabeth became Queen of England. On April 28, 1603, the new King of England, King James I, held her funeral. The funeral celebrated Queen Elizabeth's life, and most importantly, the remarkable accomplishments she made throughout her reign. Today, Queen Elizabeth is a huge part of the English history, and her accomplishment shows the dignity and determination that she always had.